Hey, this is brother Hi John. Glad to come to the Song Lab pull up. Where we can basically share, like you said, education, a little bit of knowledge, just expose people's minds to new ideas they may not have thought of, never heard of, or especially about music. My daily practice, my lifestyle is basically dealing with spirituality and try to apply that to every element of our reality. So, music is a significant piece, like you said, of metaphysics, dealing with spirituality, because that is the root of the practice of music, coming from whether it's Asia or Africa. But we had a discipline of art that really for us was a spiritual practice, a spiritual discipline. So this is as long time been forgotten because obviously music has become a little bit mundane or commercial or even for entertainment only. But despite the fact where music has gone, we still can find that the spiritual element is still there. Whether it's from classical music, jazz, uh, blues, R&B, it's still there. It's just as time progressed, we slowly lost the memory of how potent our actual intent was. So everybody has their ethnic background, and in the ethnic background, they have a music tradition. In that tradition, it'll take you back to spirituality every time. Interesting is he said a significant principle that he's motivated through music is love. So 7 levels, they call it the 7 ragas. In Asia and in the East, they have music deduced down to 7 musical notes. Ragas, that's what musical note means in Sanskrit. Ragas are basically psychological and spiritual expressions through sound. So he said love, that's a spiritual expression or raga. But we have other type of music being expressed, like we have greed, lust. These are all different levels of our psychology. When I'm speaking about spirituality, I gotta make this clear. You look up the root word of spirit, it comes from the word breath. Now, breath basically just means your psychology or your mind, your consciousness. So spirit just means consciousness. Go to the Hebrew word is ruach. It just means breath. So we're not speaking of like a spook deities or somewhere, out in outer space somewhere. We're invoking them. We're speaking about conscious experiences that you're invoking and that you're manipulating in your own life. So that's what we mean by spirituality. So each one of these 7 levels would have 7 different ragas that are expressive of different things. But the drums preside over the physical material world, or what you might say is the earth. But the string instruments is pretty much like a lot like. They may be not necessarily the earth, but they're like, it's 5 elements. So the earth is the drums, basically. But water, fire, and air is basically the strings. So these are all elemental principles. Once you move beyond the string instruments, you go to the flute. Flute is air and what's called akasha, or ether, black matter. So that's something that is codified. You can go to certain texts. This is in the Upanishad, so I got to plug in references so people can go do their research.
Yeah.
But these texts were written about 3,500 BCE. So there really was no other societies that were that advanced during this time period to this level of being able to document this type of information about music. So to study the origin of music, you can go to ancient Egypt, no doubt. You can go to the whole Nile Valley. You can go to Kush, Ethiopia, and you're safe there because they're going to give you a whole lot of knowledge about the insight about what music and the origin of it actually is. But the thing is, I usually try to go to the East because they preserved it so perfect. They preserved it well. The ancient Egyptians, we have a lot of difficulties because they have had a hard time preserving it. There's no modern day ancient Egyptians that are custodians.
Identities.
Yeah, even so, yeah, you have certain Turks and Arabs, and I'm not gonna get into no ethnic
Right.
discussion right now about that, but the legacy of these great civilizations, a lot of them are African and South Asian, but they have not been preserved. So we have to find places on the planet where we still see their beacons of light to this very day. So that's why India stands out like a jewel, but so do certain places in West Africa. But I don't want to go along with it. Let me stay in Asia, and I can kind of pivot back to you all. But in Asia, they have this concept, and we talked about it last time I was here. This is going to be the big theme: is that music is God. That's key. What I just showed you, just 7 levels of God manifesting in reality. But basically, in the ancient world, they say God is sound, or God is music itself. So that kind of can remove the whole idea of theology and confusing us and confounding us. If you just boil down God to just consciousness, or just sound, or vibration, you're getting a more purified or crystal reality of what God is. And that's all that we're in right now. This is nothing but a soup of vibration right now. Dense is what the drums. That's dense. But the lighter you go is what the strings. That's more lighter vibrations and sound. They may be like our breath or like our blood flow. But God, in its pure sense, the true original form or force of this sound was really originally nothing but ether or black matter. See where I'm going? So these levels of God, though, is framed under a concept in philosophy. It's called Vedanta philosophy. All of these terms I want people to go and research because these are jewels that'll be immortal forever.
Yeah.
Like these are the key plugs that will literally change your whole reality, your whole life, and how you view like your own life. But it's called Sarvam Brahmamayam. Now I'm doing this based on my
Yep.
memory.
Yep. You were talking about that last time. Yeah.
Check. Yeah. Sarvam Brahmamayam means Sarvam means all. Brahmamayam means God. All is God. Now this might sound like it's really religious or too theologically framed. So I'm not trying to create converts here. I just want you to be exposed and go look up what I'm saying and research this. But all is God is a high advanced philosophical idea that is theologically under something called pantheism. You have pantheism as well, but pantheism. Pantheism basically means that in the African and Asian mind, we saw God expressed in three different major forms, pervasive all throughout reality.
Yeah.
We're not separate from that same supreme being. It's just he expresses itself, or it, not he or she, or is gender neuter. It has no, see, we can't do that either because that's duality. But that consciousness or that vibration or that being expresses itself in three forms. That's Sava, Rajas, and Tama. Please go research this as well. So I'm going really deep into this. But Sava basically is what we were just saying is the flute in the higher world. Sava means holy. That is what we might say is the original form of this supreme consciousness. So that's your spiritual idea. So people who are doing music, when they do spiritual music, like the Negro spirituals or different type of, I'm not gonna say necessarily gospel music alone, but different spiritual motivated music. They're in the higher world. But when you deal with the strings, that might be more into romance. It's in the heart realm. We just saw, love. So the strings is all, but it also can be moved in the heart, fear, anxiety, depression. Because in the ancient mind, I just spoke to you about positive spirits that music presides over, but you also have demons that have to be, let's say, exorcised or removed. So if you go into the Bible, you see that King David had what a harp or a lyre of 7 strings.
Yeah.
These are these 7 strings. So he was able to manipulate and understand how to remove demons out of different enemies he had in his reality. But it's all metaphysical. I don't think anybody should take it as literal as we have been taking it in the last, 50 years, 50, 60 years in this country. But if you study the Kabbalah and metaphysics in the Hebrew tradition, you'll see they have their breakdown explanation for these type of teachings. But the frame basically is, Sarvam Brahmamayam, that means all is God. But under that, you have to express it in a certain theme. So consciousness is God, yeah, it is. But music is God as well. Because consciousness and music is one and the same. It's our conscious expression of what our psychology is experiencing. And what that would be called is music is God. That translates to Nada Brahma. Nada or Sabda means sound. But Brahma means God. So Nada Brahma is a whole philosophical tradition. I mean, you can go to whole places in Asia right now, and that is their worship. It's music. Every instrument they pick up presides over a certain deity. So what I'm saying though, we never lost this tradition. It's just we have forgotten in modern day experiences through our education system. Like we don't, because of Christianity, sure. But I just told you King David. But if you go to the Greek tradition, they have this is where the word music comes from. So there's no escaping it at all. The etymology of the word music comes from the 9 muses of the god Apollo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is Greek mythology, but I don't want to scare everybody away. He's like, oh man, he's going to, he's going to religious European ideas of spirituality. But understand, all of these different spiritual traditions come from North Africa or from Asia, from Africa, period. And we can trace Apollo to a god called Aplu. And you can trace him to a Berber or a Phoenician deity. These are African people. So I don't want to scare people away. We safe here. We all safe,
No, we're going to give people the truth.
We got to give you the truth. Yeah. But music, it comes from, the 9 muses. Each muse presides over each one of these different principles I just laid out. They're divine feminine principles, but that's called anthropomorphism. It's not literal. It's not supposed to be taken verbatim like they're literally women somewhere,
Yeah.
But you do have a concept idea that Apollo and his muses incarnate in human beings. And through that's where the expression of all music originates. So that's from the Greek mind, I know, but remember, like I said, you can go to ancient Egypt. It's there. You can go to ancient India, which I'm breaking down thoroughly right now.
So what I'm getting from everything that you've just explained is that music and sound really music is just a collection of sounds. Sound in itself is God.
Check.
Now you can have chaotic sounds, you can have harmonic sounds.
Beautifully put. That's it.
It
Well,
represents the duality of our
You did the whole spectrum right there.
universe. Yeah.
Perfect harmony versus chaos. These lower worlds beyond the drums, you have your they say the 808s and chaos, like I told you before. What's it called? Hard rock and hard metal. It's pure chaos. That represents the lower worlds. But see, R&B, where it's a little bit, rhythm and blues, it's a little bit more in the higher spaces. I have all of this charted out. This is not me going off the top of my head. All of these are references. I have books that I can unpack for days, and I'll put the references at the back of this video. But in the higher worlds is the flute. You can go into classical music or core music, get like the chanting, all of the chanting. Well, all of that is basically states, they're transcendental states that we humans can experience. But like you were just expressing, they're natural in nature.
Right.
It's literally as within, so without. We're just copying. Remember, I said the earth, water, fire, air. We're just copying the 5 elements in nature through a storyline within our own instruments.
And at the knowledge level, I see here on the paper you have classical music.
Yeah.
Choral music or like orchestral,
Yeah, I actually wanted to put that orchestral. I did want to put that, actually.
Okay, because that's because you now harmonize all of those levels together, right?
Even
it's the biggest harmony of all of those instruments and levels. Is what I'm
saying. Yeah. That's fair. I mean, in classical, you're right, they integrate it all, but we go even to jazz. They use the same, like a good portion of those classical instruments. So you see how we cutting down lower?
Yeah.
But down here, we're in hip hop. I mean, and
you just gotta
just basically just bass.
Pretty much.
Kicks and snares.
Well, right. I mean, that is interesting to look at it from that level to see what spirits you're incorporating into your music.
That's
as
what
you're
I'm
using
trying
different
to
instruments.
That's what I'm.
You could kind of use that along with your intent and your message to speak to that it is spirit or yet consciousness of its own.
Check. And
a vibration.
I don't want to be confusing when I say God, because I know we have a Western pre-assumption of what God may be. But when I say God, I mean many different expressions of consciousness. See, remember, Sarvam Brahma Mayam. It means all is God. But it's all is God, but at different levels of consciousness. So, I can see animals, and I'm like, they're like, you gonna say that's God? Oh yeah, at a lower level of consciousness. But so I'm not necessarily saying we humans are the highest level of consciousness either. But music is one of the purest forms of that supreme consciousness or that supreme self. She said the word move. That's a key word. Move is also the etymological root word of music. Same word. Even the word mind or mentality. That word, you look it up, music, it'll literally take you to the mind or mentality. So that's all you're really doing is you're mastering your own psychology. That is God. God dwells within. That's the true kingdom of God.
So music, mind,
yes.
Mental.
We'll make a graph and we'll show the etymological root.
Motion.
Root word.
Due to the fact, the vibrative nature, going back into the fact that with sound, all those levels is the vibrative nature.
Check. Absolutely.
Creates and facilitates motion. Emotion.
In motion, yeah. Spirit said all is spirit, all is consciousness. So you have to understand it like a cosmology. Cosmology is organizing the whole cosmos in different spectrums of principles. So that's what mythology was used for. It was a teaching tool. We never really believed in animal-headed deities, literally. We never believed in bowing down to literally forces in nature. It's all supposed to be metaphysically, like the word you used earlier, or esoterically translated to principles that can be measured in nature, or within inside of our body, more importantly. Remember, like I said, the true God is within you. But in context of what they were sharing, though, in this spectrum on the first level, or actually the lowest level, is we have music about crime and murder. That is the chaos or the evil that he was speaking of earlier. That, our ancestors was like, oh no, can't have that in the house. Crime and murder, it's called the Patala realms, or the lowest levels of hell. So if you look at, it's a form called the cosmic man, which is like an anthropomorphic form of God. But I'll show that picture. You'll see God. You even have the Kabbalah tree of life, but you have these different levels inside of the body of an anthropomorphic deity or God. See, so the feet is crime and murder. So for a lot of our people in the community, they do get, the seduction of that type of spirit. and that's where murder and crime influences our psychology. Those are deities, but yeah, you might say that they're demons and different lower type of entities. But the thing is, like I said, all is God, but just at different levels of consciousness. But crime and murder is the lowest. Crime, murder, and rape is pretty much the lowest of the spiritual states. So that would be pretty much beneath the 7 worlds or beneath the 7 principles. Now these principles are in our body, so as I go through them, I'll break them down in our body. But the next state is you have, it's about materialism, money. It's all about wealth, riches. That's all they rap about all day. Well, that is the Muladhara chakra or the root chakra. But to put it in another language, we can just say it's the pretty much the base fundamental level of our reality. It's called Bhuloka. These are Sanskrit words. I'll give charts and I'll show these worlds. But remember, I said this is spirit here. I'm talking about spiritual. So these are different entities of spirits that dwell within human beings. So we all have these spirits inside of our body, but some people are more gravitating toward the materialistic spirits.
They can touch.
Check the ones that are sensory, 5 senses deal with the body, the physical body. So comfort, luxury. But a lot of times they can become corrupted, and you have greed, war, competition, and jealousy, and all of these other. Oh, well, that's the next one. Okay, so the next round would pretty much be lust and hypersexuality. So once it gets so corrupted in that round, the music will even start gearing.
But I think, isn't that where gluttony would be actually too? Because you're just pleasuring yourself. It's like an over pleasuring.
It is. It's just you pretty much you were exposed to this then. Yeah, that's it. It's either food. It's called hedonism.
Hedonism.
Yeah, hedonism. So
and that whole hedonists, they were all about making sure their pleasures got met.
See, so we move on to the next ones though. We have pretty much fame. People who rap about or sing about their ego, like fame, becoming well known or being celebrities and so on. It's a certain state. See, it's not as low or as dark as murder and crime, but it's still not as supreme and high as the states I'm about to travel to. But the next state you have is pretty much emotion. It's the R&B, where it's a little bit, rhythm, blues. It's a little bit more in the higher spaces. So that's like the blues. But it's emotions. You can even go and say like love, like you said earlier. That's in the heart. Now that music is pretty much the equal balance. Yeah. That's where we're living in the place where she spoke of in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. But the suffering, we got to keep that included as well, because you have human expression where they get beyond caring about fame and money and lust, and they just depressed, man. This material world is just suffering for them. But that's the blues. That's all they sung about, pretty much. And no, blues doesn't originate from our oppression and slavery. Blues originates as a philosophical practice from West Africa. So the Fulani and the Hausa and these different African griots is what they call. They would sing about their different perspectives of philosophical stances about reality. So that's the birth of the blues. It came into the what you call the slave plantations, and eventually travels up, from Louisiana and Mississippi up into Chicago. So blues though is in the heart, but then rhythm in blues, because we start weeping and crying about pretty much how our relationship dynamics become. So that's the duality agenda right there in the heart. But moving beyond that, because that was well for us, like she said, that went well for us. We had a pretty successful era in our culture in that realm. But next you have is what's poetry and philosophy. So that's your hip hop pretty much. That's jazz. You know what I'm saying? That's out of Harlem in Chicago. So that would be like in the throat. See, I went to the heart. But see, the philosophy and the teachings and the poetry, trying to be witty, because the word hip comes from the word to be knowledgeable. It's a Senegalese word. It's from Senegal. So it's actually an African word. Hip hop actually comes from, the whole concept comes from Africa, but it was in jazz. See, jazz artists used to say, are you hip? I mean, are you knowledgeable? Do you know the reality of what jazz is and where it came from? Because jazz is spiritual. That's where I'm really trying to go. Blues is spiritual as well. So hip hop becomes what we expressing pretty much as poetry or lyricism, But moving from the throat, you move to the brow realm, and that realm you have is nothing but knowledge. So you can call it the golden age of hip hop. You can call that like neo soul. She spoke about conscious music earlier. He spoke about the solar Aquarians. But that's pretty much the state that we're at right now. See, you go to every coast on the East Coast, you got J. Cole.
Yeah.
In Chicago, you got figures like Kanye and Chance the Rapper, rappers like that, alternative rappers. Lupe Fiasco. You go to the West Coast, you got Kendrick Lamar. So now we on this knowledge level, and that's a type of spirit of music. It's to muse or to channel a certain spirit. And I'm gonna go to this last state. This is the seventh and highest state, and that's basically spirituality. So spirituality or God itself, is probably the most vague for us right now in our culture. But that takes me to really my conclusion and closure for what I'm sharing, because in Asia and in Africa, they realize that they have to, all of these are going to be expressed. Everybody's going to grab an instrument and express what they want, whether it's drums, strings, or flute. Everybody's going to express what they is genuinely feeling in their spine, in their soul. But the practice of, I think me and Nat was talking about it, is music a hobby? And what I'm trying to express is that music is not necessarily just a hobby or even a profession. It can be a ritual. And that ritual is a devotion to the supreme consciousness at every moment. And that practice is called bhakti. So all of these teachings, though, I did give some references. I said the Upanishads earlier. But there's books called the Bhagavad Gita. See that root word, Bhagavad Gita. And you can read Srimad Bhagavatam. But in the Bhakti Sutras, these are all ancient texts. These are different texts. We'll show the books. We'll put the books up. And it'll unpack everything here. It's no secret. I'm not trying to, hold it hostage and hide it from anybody. In these texts, though, they give you a format that music with an instrument and, playing it right out in the public, or whether it's recorded or not, whatever level it's expressed to be spiritual. So this is called the Bhakti tradition. Ancient Egypt had the same. The whole Nile Valley had the same. This is where the Hebrews got it from. The Greeks, when we said like the muses, earlier. Yeah. It all comes from this type of spiritual and cultural expression. Remember, like I said earlier, bhakti is the practice that nada brahma, meaning sound or music. Music is God.